Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. It's a pretty good time to be a fan of cold and wintry weather as we now begin the cold spell, which is going to last through the week and even bring the chance of some snow in actually a fair few number of places and possibly some significant snow. But we'll look at all the details of how, where, when and why through the course of this video, going chronologically through the week and examining the cold and snow potential. We'll start off though by doing a quick overview of seeing how this setup has come to fruition, and I talked in my previous videos about how this high pressure was located across the continent and has eventually drifted to the west and then started to, off screen over Greenland, build a new high pressure which is driving winds from the north to develop across the UK. And you can see here that by Sunday the cold air has now started to infiltrate, and if we look at the temperature chart, and this is the temperature at 1.5 kilometers above the ground, so this gives us a pretty good idea of the air mass at play. If you look at that chart, you can see that by Sunday, by the evening, and I think earlier on as well, or yeah, basically by Sunday morning, that cold air, those blues, have started to move over the UK and Ireland, and especially across Scotland, we're starting to see the -5 value show up widely, and that's generally the temperature we're looking at for snow to occur. And that means by this point we're already going to start getting snow showers developing in these regions by Sunday. So the snow starts on Sunday, and then you can see during the course of the week that cold air eventually covers all of the UK and Ireland, so the risk of snow becomes quite widespread, and we'll look at whether that can be taken advantage of or if that's not going to happen through the course of this video. And then just for fun, if we look at the European model, the weekly anomalies, you can see a lot of pink showing over Greenland and the high latitudes, and then blue to the east of us, and that's of course driving this generally northerly to northeasterly flow through the course of this week. In terms of the snow risk, the main risk we're going to start to see develop initially, and this is going to be the most consistent risk, is going to be the risk of snow showers. Now I made a graphic here to show the general rough areas at risk of snow from Sunday into Tuesday, so the first few days of this cold spell. So don't be disappointed if your areas are not in the map currently, because the risk will become more widespread later on. You can see pretty much anywhere in white, and even some places beyond that, but anywhere in this white shading is at risk of snow showers at times. A couple accumulations may be possible, but the more focused risk of snow showers will be in this general pink region here, so northern coasts, and then especially across northern Scotland, western Scotland, parts of eastern England as well, potentially further south, and also parts of Wales and northwest England, and we'll look at those areas in detail shortly. The other main area to look out for is southern Scotland through northern England and into parts of the Midlands, where there is the possibility of frontal snow somewhere in this zone. We know it's going to happen, but we just don't know where. But I'll look at the possible scenarios, of course, in more detail shortly. Now, I was talking about the snow shower risk, and this is really being driven by the temperature contrast between the upper levels and the sea surface temperatures. Now, this is the map of the sea surface temperatures, and you can see across the sea to our north, we're generally looking at values around 10 to 12 degrees Celsius, and you can see further north it drops off to around 6 to 10, but this is still around 20 degrees, or not quite, but in some cases 15 to 20 degrees colder than the forecast air temperature. And you can see that here we've got -10 just to the north of Scotland, and that does come fairly far south with -8, -9 across Scotland there. And if you imagine you've got a 15 to 20 degree temperature contrast all in this zone, that is going to create instability, and as that instability develops, we're going to get showers, convection, and because it's so cold, all of that precipitation is going to fall as snow. And as the wind is just staying northerly throughout the entire duration of the week, which you can see there, what's going to happen is those snow showers just pile up into the northern coasts. And you can see that if we look at the UKV model here, they start on Sunday and they initially are fairly weak, and then you can see they're just very consistent in this zone here. Now ignore this massive band of snow, we're going to talk about that very shortly, but you can see that through the course of the week on the end of the model, and this is only to Wednesday, they're just staying constantly in this zone. And so even by Tuesday we're looking at widely fairly significant accumulations across northern Scotland and also parts of Northern Ireland and Ireland. So that's the first thing we're going to talk about, and this is a fairly high confidence forecast. Anywhere across northern Scotland is likely to see these snow showers with potentially significant accumulations, and also across parts of Northern Ireland as well. That is pretty much locked in terms of the snow threat for now. But the second potential development we're going to be seeing, well, this is not even potential, this is going to happen, and I talked about it last time, but I said the uncertainty is very high, and it still is very high. But watch this low developing along the temperature contrast here. Notice how it kind of slides to the south and then gets slightly deeper over time. But on the northern side of this, we are going to see precipitation because we've got a warm front here. And that means we're going to see lift. That's going to, like I said, cause precipitation. Where it's on the cold side of the boundary, that's going to fall as snow. And the GFS in this case shows that developing through parts of Ireland and Northern Ireland and then across the Midlands on overnight on Tuesday. And if this were to occur, it would bring a fairly significant accumulation, likely 1 to 5 centimeters in places. So you may think, oh, this is great, we're going to see a snow risk, but if we look at the GFS ensembles and we look at the storm tracks, you can see that there is a very wide range in the potential track to this storm. If it starts further north, it's number one, likely going to strengthen, as shown by the lighter dots there, and potentially bring the threat of very strong winds to eastern areas, which I'll talk about shortly. And then the snow threat would be much further north, across Northern Ireland, into Scotland and across Northern England, with the potential for blizzard conditions here. But if we go further south, then we're potentially seeing a snow event across southern England and the Midlands, likely to be less snow, but still at least a covering possible. If we take a look at some of those different scenarios then, this is the icon model here. This is probably the most extreme model out there currently for the snow setup. And if I zoom into the UK and Ireland here, no, you can see it initially develops as a fairly moderate low, and then we've got this cold air on the northern flank. This precipitation does then turn to snow widely from northern England into Scotland, and we end up with strong winds coinciding with that. And you can see the eventual totals are widely 5 to 15 centimeters, and it would be more than this because this site underdoes the snow totals in my opinion. But you can see here, this, if it were to occur, would be a very significant event. But the key emphasis is were to occur, because it's very, very uncertain, and we just don't know. Even though it's just 3 days away, we don't quite know the track, the exact track of this low. In terms of timing, though, we do know it will be likely through Monday overnight and then through Tuesday. This time period here, that is the when we should be on the lookout for this threat. Now, the other thing I want to talk about is, I mentioned the strong wind risk. The icon here, you can see, develops an exceptionally strong wind risk, with winds in this particular scenario well over 100 miles an hour through the Irish Channel, the Irish Sea, and then that transfers eastwards with winds well over 60 to 70 miles an hour through much of England, even 80 miles an hour across the Midlands here, and then again 100 miles an hour on the northeast coast, and then 100 miles an hour into parts of Kent. So that would be a ridiculously extreme scenario. That would be a massive, major storm. However, it's quite unlikely at this time. Number one, the icon model is notorious for overdoing wind speeds on storms. Even if it's got the actual strength of the storm correct, it overdoes the actual wind speeds compared to real life. But number two, it's the only model to have a low this deep. Or actually, that's not quite true. I'll talk about that soon. But it's on the much more extreme end of scenarios. The much more kind of common scenario is either for a weaker low, like the GFS, or like the European model here, which shows less strong winds, but the risk of snow, of course, on the northern half of the low, as you can see here. But remember, the weaker the low, the further south it goes, and the stronger the low, the further north it goes. So if you're in southern England, you are and you're a fan of extreme weather, you're either hoping for the most extreme northerly solutions or the most extreme southerly solutions, because if it's far south, which none of the models really show at the moment, you'd get snow in this band here, or if it's extremely far north but a lot stronger, you'd get very strong winds in this zone here. So that's definitely something to look out for. And if we look at the European model ensembles, that shows that risk quite nicely. Each of these dots represents a different possible position of the storm, and this cluster of green and black dots indicates the potential for a slightly stronger low with strong winds in the east, and then of course snow on the northern half of that. So unfortunately, even at this range, I can't give too much actual confirmation on where the snow risk will be, other than it will be in this general zone here. Personally, I think the most likely solution is what the European model and the UKV has. That's kind of the middle ground and shows a band of snow developing through Northern Ireland, the northern half of the Midlands into northern England and southern Scotland, and this would bring a fairly significant accumulation. This is the UKV, and as you can see earlier, it's showing a similar thing to the European, slightly further north. I think it will be slightly further south than this, probably into parts of the northern Midlands here, and that is because these setups do have a history of trending slightly further south as you get closer to the time, and so the further north solutions I think will probably moderate and come south, and the further south solutions I think will probably disappear and will start to converge on something like this. So I don't want to give a guarantee that this is where the snow will fall, but I think the general most likely scenario, probably 50 to 70% chance, is this sort of setup right here, which would bring a risk of snow for some fairly major cities. Newcastle perhaps, but the wind off the coast might moderate that, but especially Manchester and then into the Pennines, so Leeds as well, at risk of potentially some snow there. And in terms of totals, we may be looking at fairly significant accumulations, but I will do further updates when this becomes more clear. As always, the forecast can change. I wouldn't rule out even snow as far south as the Midlands. The most extreme would probably be as far south as London. And at the same time, I wouldn't rule out snow as far north as Aberdeen and Inverness. Those areas will be seeing snow from snow showers anyway. So that's one big thing to watch. Both the strong wind threat, because that could be quite nasty depending on how quickly the low deepens, because it's also worth noting the low is going to deepen eventually. You can see the European model has it deepening to that strength just later on, so the Icon model might be onto something and deepening it a bit faster than the other models. I personally think that's not the case, but we'll have to watch and see. I mean, the French model has that happening just after it leaves the UK, so strong wind just across the east coast, but you never know. I'm going to keep an eye on it and of course update you guys when things change. So in terms of that, that's going to be Monday through Tuesday, and then that's going to be the period Wednesday onwards when the entire UK is covered by snow. No, I wish. When the entire UK is covered by the cold air. You can see dark blue colours showing up, widely very cold. In terms of the temperatures, how cold it's actually going to feel, let's take a look at the minimum temperatures. You can see as we go later on through the week, we're likely to see sub-zero very widely, even across the far south, potentially -5 more across the high ground later in the week, and even during the daytime it's likely to feel very cold. This is the maximum temperatures at 3 o'clock on Wednesday afternoon. Only maximums of 4 or 5 degrees. In my opinion, this could go even lower depending on the cold air, how far south it gets, but generally it's looking pretty good. Now you may be thinking, oh no, I'm in the south, there's no snow risk for me. However, I would disagree, and I'm going to make quite a bold claim here, but I think by the end of this week, by Saturday, Sunday, I think the majority of the UK will have at least seen flakes of snow. I'm not going to say about accumulations because I don't think that's as likely, but I think at least the majority of the UK will have seen falling snow, and I'll explain why now. Now this northerly is quite unusual in that it's quite a dynamic and quite an intense northerly, and part of the reason for this is we've got this jet stream, and actually this very strong section of the jet stream, oh I can't see that colour at all, you've got this very strong section of the jet stream just to our southwest, as you can see here. And naturally when you've got a gradient of weak winds and strong winds, you have something called shear instability, and this is a fairly kind of obscure section of weather forecasting, but essentially the difference between these two creates vorticity, because if you imagine the winds are stronger here, they're weaker there, and so you kind of create this turning motion like that, and that creates positive vorticity, which brings about generally upper level lift. And I'm not going to, you can't kind of specify exact regions just going off this method alone, but it indicates the general environment is favourable for quite a dynamic and unstable northerly flow. Number one, like I said, we have these large temperature contrast between the ocean and the sea surface temperatures, and this is going to create some very, very steep lapse rates. And actually, if I take a sounding, just choose a random place off the north coast of Scotland, you can see look at that lapse rate. I mean, it's very, very strong. Oh, you can't see that, sorry. It's a very strong lapse rate on the sounding here. And don't worry if you don't understand this. It's essentially showing the decrease of temperature with height, or at least how the temperature changes. And for you to get this profile in the winter is quite exceptional. And this is a very strong gradient of temperature decrease, which would suggest intense convection for the time of year at least, which would bring very, very heavy snow under any of these showers. And these showers are going to be hit and miss. But I think the potential for intense snow showers is, to be honest, quite high. And I really think we're going to see, especially across the north, but infiltrating further south as we go on through the week, fairly large, not large accumulations, but the risk of snow showers building and actually being quite widespread. So that's one thing. Another thing, when you've got such intense lapse rates, any sort of feature, small disturbance can build onto that and actually develop into a small low, small trough, and bring the risk of snow, which can't be seen by the models more than a couple of days in advance, but can actually bring snow events such as 10th of December 2022, 10 centimetres of snow widely across southeast England. But the models didn't even know that was going to happen until 2 days away. And I'm not going to say the same thing is going to happen again, but I'm trying to say that a similar thing, in my opinion, is quite likely somewhere. Now, this is the annoying part. We don't know where this is going to happen. But if we take a look at the 500 millibar pattern, you can see. Oh, I don't know what's going. I don't really know what's going on. Okay, I don't know what happened there. It seems like the thing has just reset, but that's not an issue. If you take a look at the 500 millibar pattern, this is through the mid levels. You can see it's quite an unstable, quite a messy pattern. And if you take a look at the the bumps in the flow here, the kinks in the ice bars, that indicates the presence of many kind of short waves and features in the unstable northerly, which would likely bring a vertical motion and the risk of snow. Because when you get vertical motion, you get precipitation, and that falls as snow. And in this case, this is especially evident if you take a look at the midnight run. Let me show you here. Yeah, I mean, you can see all those kind of the waviness across the moving down into Scotland and then further south. And in my opinion, the combination of the lapse rates, which means the convection is going to be very, very strong, with the risk of thunder snow actually, the combination of that with any small low features, I've circled the examples here, that's not necessarily going to happen. But I think we're going to see at least one, likely more, scenarios where we get a small disturbance, maybe even a polar low, a small feature, which is going to bring snow to a fairly large region, whether that be down the east coast, maybe areas further west, maybe down the middle. Like I said, we can't say where or when exactly this is going to happen, but I'm going to say now, and this is quite a bold statement, but I think from Wednesday to Saturday, I really think there is a significant risk of this, and hence the statement, the majority of the UK will see at least flakes of snow, because it may not be significant, but I think at least we're going to see the risk of that really happening. And I just would keep an eye on the forecast if I were you, even though the models aren't showing anything too significant at the moment. With that having said, there's a few more areas we do need to talk about. The GFS has now backed off it, but it did have a low pressure moving into the south, bringing snow on Thursday. I think this is not going to happen, but I just want to flag it as a potential thing to look out for because the model shows it, and the European model has it just scraping the south. So if this were to happen, it would be far south only, but like I said, I think it would trend further south over time, though of course I will update you. And then the other thing I want to talk about is the potential for snow streamers. Now these are quite nice features if you're a fan of snow, and the main risk is going to be across Western Wales and then into the Cheshire Gap here across northwest England. The temperature contrast between the sea and the cold air will create instability, and then the combined impact of the winds funneling the terrain, or the terrain funneling the winds kind of converging into the zone, in my opinion, will bring the risk of longer periods of snow through northwestern England, this general region here, on Wednesday into Thursday. It's quite a long way away, so I'll give more details on that later, but potentially we're looking at a few accumulations there, possibly significant. And then similar thing, I think we're going to see the risk of a longer period of snow and a snow streamer developing across western Wales, especially into Pembrokeshire. You might see a Pembrokeshire dangler starting to develop. So that is another thing to look out for. And of course, I'm going to do more updates. I'm probably going to start doing a video every day, depending on time. And it's been quite a long one today, but I think I've hopefully given everyone a good update on what's going to happen. But anyway, thank you very much for watching and have a great day. Bye-bye.